Welcome to The Dirt on the Past, a program of the Extreme History Project that explores the good, the bad, and the ugly about our human past. Because, let's face it, Crystal.
Yep, history very often isn't pretty, but it is so important to know.
Because it is the very thing that has led us to the most critical concerns that we have in the present. Join me, Nancy Mahoney.
And me, Crystal Alegria.
As we talk to archaeologists and historians who've been digging in the dirt
and in the archives
to uncover the fascinating histories that are not only relevant to today's issues,
but which help us better understand how to address them.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of the show. I'm Nancy.
And I'm Crystal.
And we are co-hosts of The Dirt on the Past. This week, we are at the Extreme History offices speaking in person with Francesca Pine Rodriguez about Yellowstone Revealed, a series of indigenous-led public artworks and interactive experiences in Yellowstone Park. We're excited to talk with Francesca, but first, as usual, Crystal, let's check in. How was your week or your month? It's been a while since we've done this.
Yeah, it has been a little bit of time, so there's been a lot that has happened, but the most recent and what's most in my mind right now is we did an event called History After Dark.
Yes.
And so we did that a week ago, and it's a great event that we do. We haven't done it for a couple years, but it's a great event that we do in October usually, and we bring the characters of Bozeman's history to life. And so
fun.
We had 13 characters this year, which
fantastic.
Was a lot.
Yeah,
which was a lot. And so it's a one night only kind of situation, and people walk around and talk to John Bozeman, Nelson Story, Rosa Beale, all the characters.
So just who's ever out on the street downtown on that Friday night, Saturday night, Friday night?
People get tickets and they come and they get a map to where everybody's standing and they get to walk around and talk to them. And then, of course, all the people that are just downtown, doing their thing are like, why are all these people in costume walking around downtown Bozeman? So
yeah, my
fun.
Husband was scrolling through Instagram, and there's an Ask Bozeman page, and somebody typed in, we're laying there on our couch at home, and somebody typed in, what's with all the old-timey people walking around downtown? And he looked at me and we're like, oh yeah, History After Dark. Yeah. So it was good. You got a lot of, curious people interested. A future member of the event for next year.
Yeah, so it was great. So that has taken a lot of our time, but it's always such a good event. So
13
we're glad to be doing
people.
It again.
Who did you have? People that I know?
Yeah, lots of people lots of... we had historic characters that kind of ran the gamut from, our capitalists like Nelson Story to our madams like Libby Hayes and our townspeople like Rosa Beale, who was here right from the get-go, the start of Bozeman. So we had Andrew Garcia, who is played by my husband Larry. So
fantastic.
It was just great. But and then we had Walter Cooper, who was played by Alex Newby, who is a member of Mountain Time Arts as well, and then also does our walking tours for us in the summer. So we had a lot of different people who were here playing different characters, and so it was great. But Nancy, what about you? What's been going on with you this last month?
A lot's been going on. And it's funny that you mentioned Alex Newby, because I think all three of us have our own relationships with him. He was just at our house last night. We were doing a photo shoot for Alloy, our men's store that opened up around the corner from Mocha. We had a big grand opening, and Alex has been coming in, and he loves the clothes. And of course, he has such a, with his mustache and beard and everything, he has such a nice presence that Lauren, my manager there, had asked him to come to the photo shoot. So he showed up and modeled for us along with several other people out at our property last night. So that was really fun.
Good.
Yes.
I'm so glad to hear that.
So that went well, and that store is up and running, which is really great.
Good.
But really, some shared news we have, Crystal, is that our sons are moving in together, and they're going to be roommates. This is nothing that either of us could have foreseen.
Never.
And let's just say, if doing a podcast together isn't enough to test a friendship, let's hope that having our sons move in together, that neither one of them is sort of icky enough that the other one doesn't get upset. So I'm sure we'll hear about it.
I told Lawson, I said, Lawson, you're going to have to always do your dishes.
Aiden will make sure he does. Yes. Aiden is very neat in the common area, the common spaces, and the bathroom, but you can barely open the door to his room. So what you do in your own room, Lawson, is fine with us. No one will have an issue with it. Aiden will be fine. I think they'll get on really well.
I think they will. Lawson really admires your son and really enjoys visiting with him about all sorts of things. So I think they're going to do very well together as roommates.
I think they will too. And I have to say, they share their love of cars. And what my son showed me last night really surprised me was that your son's formerly blue Subaru WRX is now pink. And it wasn't a paint job. He wrapped it, shrink wrapped it. And then I was like, I didn't even know that's a thing. It was fascinating. It looked really cool, I have to say.
Good. Yeah. I think it does too, but I'm his mom, so.
I know. I just was like, well, we're going to know where Lawson is when he's driving around town. We're going to be like, that's Lawson's car.
Car in town.
So I'm very excited for them. I think it's going to be nice energy for the both of them. I know. So it's great.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, and you know his landlord, so we're good about stuff.
I know. I'm like, well, I know the landlord.
But he's out of the house. Our boys are out of the house. I know. Yeah. So yes. So I think we should get back to our guest. What do you think, Crystal?
We should. So we are so glad to have you with us today, Francesca. Welcome.
Thank you. So happy and honored to be here with you guys.
Welcome.
Are you gals? Excuse me.
Yeah.
And Francesca has some beautiful jewelry on for those of you who aren't with us seeing it. It's absolutely stunning.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
I want to start off by telling our listeners a little bit about you, Francesca. So Francesca Pine Rodriguez is a member of the Crow and Northern Cheyenne Nations. She grew up on both reservations and in Billings, Montana. She has worked for Montana State University, both in the Native American Studies program and in student services, also for National Indigenous Leadership programs and in administrative posts at Little Bighorn College. Her academic background is in environmental studies and public administration, and she currently serves as the executive director of Mountain Time Arts.
So, Francesca, we want to talk to you today about Yellowstone Revealed, as Nancy said earlier, which is a program of Mountain Time Arts. But before we get to that, I want to just give our listeners a little bit of context. So can you start off by telling us a little bit about Mountain Time Arts that you currently lead?
Sure. Nisoya Nashave. My name is 20 Stans, and everybody knows me as Francesca Pine Rodriguez. Mountain Time Arts is a Bozeman-based nonprofit that works to drive change through the cultivation of bold and engaging public works of art, projects and programs that explore history, culture, and environment of the Rocky Mountain West and its sovereign nations. Mountain Time Arts prides itself on providing a platform for impactful art, and we really love to get people conversating about things that they potentially may have never started a conversation about before. Yeah. That relates to the land, the environment, and the issues that all come along with that.
Yeah. I think art is such a good forum to start those kind of conversations. My husband being a photographic artist too, he's always looking at the ways in which art can engage people in conversations they may not normally think they're entering into, but it's kind of a nice way to broach sometimes very big and complicated topics, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. So I think that's such a lovely mission for the program.
Yeah, and we've had a long history, Extreme History has had a long history with Mountain Time Arts too. And we've done a walking tour. I think it was the first year that Mountain Time Arts really got itself up and going. We did a walking tour in collaboration with Mountain Time Arts that was about the history of water in Bozeman. And we did a walking tour called Bozeman, what did we call the tour? But anyway, it was about Bozeman Creek, which really runs right through the middle of Bozeman. So, and you guys are continuing that work and continuing to do pieces around Bozeman Creek, which I think is amazing. So, yeah.
Definitely. And Bozeman Creek is right beneath our feet all the time.
Right.
And we, a lot of people don't even know it's there. It runs right under Main Street, right through Nova and Bar 9. And, there are some things on the ground that kind of mark it, but I don't feel like people fully grasp the fact that there's a creek running right beneath their feet. Rather than it being kind of like this hidden gem, I would like to make it not hidden anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they covered it up. They covered it, the pieces that people would see most being the part of the creek that runs right through downtown, they've completely covered. So people don't have any idea. So I'm glad that you guys are still working on that and doing more around that, because it's beautiful, and I get to see it because it literally runs right by this building that we're sitting in right now.
On the other side, I know.
Yeah, and it does peek out for a little bit right here. So if I walk anywhere, I get to stand and watch the creek and see it rise in the spring and fall. In the fall right now, it's really low. There's not a lot of water running through.
But it is perennial, right? It runs all year round.
Does.
And it's such an important water source for the community. It's so interesting when you think of other towns in Montana that have been built alongside a big river. The river is there and it's so present and everything. And this creek, even though it's small, is incredibly important. And I think it is so interesting at getting covered up. I didn't know about it for years until really I started working with extreme history and kind of realized that it was flowing underneath these places. Yeah. It's very cool. One of these days I want to float it all the way down, because we heard stories of people doing that. Yeah. I know. I say I want to do that, but I'm not entirely sure. All right, maybe I'll take your advice.
But I know a lot of people who have done that.
Yeah.
And so
maybe I'll just float a rubber ducky through.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that idea.
And we're going to have a really, really amazing way to view Bozeman Creek coming up on Earth Day, and I will talk a little bit more about that when we get to that section.
Oh, fantastic. That's exciting.
Good,
a little tantalizing thing to keep our listeners listening. Okay. So let's dig into Yellowstone Revealed and talk a little bit more about that, what it is, what it might become in the future. So, Francesca, can you start by telling us what the project was, and is it going to continue?
Well, the project was a series of public artworks in Yellowstone National Park, and we wanted to, our goal, put very succinctly, was to establish Indigenous presence, and for people to see it, for people to be there and it be hard not to see it. And so I think because one of the interesting facts about Yellowstone National Park is there hadn't been a teepee in the park since it's been a park. So that's 150 years.
That's crazy to think about, because we know there's encampments there that go back thousands and thousands of years. So we know those structures were there.
Exactly. And so, historically, Native Americans, American Indians, for me, that would just be my people, were a part of the ecology of the park long before it was ever a park.
Right.
And so by actually removing our people from the area, it's actually disturbed the landscape. And so it's, it's just kind of interesting the way it's been presented to the public all of these years. And we really wanted to let people know that Native Americans have always been there. We continue to be there, and we will hopefully be a part of co-creating a new future that includes Indigenous presence in the parks in the future.
How was it working with the Park Service itself to get these artworks and public interactive experiences off the ground during this past summer?
So working with the people was incredibly joyous and challenging at times, but it didn't have anything to do with anybody not wanting to participate. I felt like almost everybody that, was a part of Yellowstone Revealed, and there was many, many hundreds of people who were part of Yellowstone Revealed, that really felt like it was time for this story to be told and included. And I really have to credit the leadership over there at Yellowstone National Park, Cam Shawley, along with Christina White, and one of our rangers. I always just call him Tim T. It's Timothy Townsend.
Well done pulling that out.
I have a nickname for him, so I'm like, I have to remember his real name. And so, but I mean, the challenge was not necessarily working with the people or making the right connections. The challenge was, how do we work within a system that doesn't really allow for this?
Right. It's a bureaucracy set up originally to do something totally else. And originally in the beginning, it was set up to keep Native people completely out.
Exactly.
And there was no effort to tell the story. So interesting to put it that way and say, yes, now people are willing to do it, but the Park Service and Yellowstone Park in particular weren't set up to do that. But now hopefully all these things will change. I'm wondering, Francesca, just for our listeners in particular, could you give us one or two examples of what things actually happened in the park or occurred in the park during Yellowstone Revealed?
Sure. We had three major things happening, which was, four. I'm just going to start from the beginning. Right when you enter the park, you will see teepee or teepees by the entrance signs. And for me, like, that's right away. You should
symbol
know.
Right there.
Yeah. I would hope that people would be reminded that they are on Indian land.
Absolutely.
And so when they come into the park, I hope that they're coming with that. And then as you're driving in from the west entrance, you would then a few miles down the road encounter teepees off in the distance. And you get closer and closer, approach them, and you see that it's actually a village.
Oh,
there were 13 teepees there that we set up. And, it was my intention to really get like 27 teepees, but we're working up to it. And so, and that's really to try to show at least the relationship that exists now with the parks. And there are 27 tribes that are recognized as having ties to the land. Just within our research, we found it's more closer to 50 tribes.
It's amazing. And so the 13 that were represented there are 13 of those 50 overall that have connections, ongoing and historical.
Well, I used hopefully a little trick to actually try to honor all of the tribes, because 12 of the teepees were for the people who had what we call cultural ambassadors, people there who could talk about their tribal relationship to the park or just whatever questions that people had.
Participants, people visiting the park could just come up and have a discussion. Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. Yes, they could just come up and have a discussion, and those people might have, things to show them. Everybody just kind of brought what they wanted. And then, and so there was that exchange. And then we had one bigger teepee in the middle that represented all of the people who could not be there.
Wonderful. Nice. That's lovely.
Because their presence was invited and honored, and even though for whatever reason they couldn't be there, we wanted to honor their presence and have a space for them. And so at that teepee, we actually had a young girl, Georgeline Marcette, who is a college student at MSU, come, and she realized that her tribe wasn't on that list of the 27 tribes that are recognized as having a relationship with Yellowstone Park. And so she was like, I don't have a teepee. I don't have a place here. And I said, well, yes, you do. You have the biggest teepee, actually, and you're right in the middle.
Wonderful.
And so she did feel like she had a place. And, anybody who wanted to come talk about their tribe, they were totally welcome to come be in that space. And so that was just the teepee village portion. And then, so that was one thing. Yeah. And then we had Rematriate, which were the buffalo dances by Patty Valdez, who is an expert in bison restoration and ecology and everything. And we'll talk a little bit more about her in a bit. And then another really awesome piece was the cultural tours, where we had a ticketing system where people could actually go on a bus tour along the Grand Southern Loop of Yellowstone Park and have an indigenously led tourism experience, I guess, where the tribal representative, I shouldn't say tribal representative, the cultural ambassador of that particular day we had different tribes represented
on
each
different
day.
days. Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
And so even if you were somebody who attended every day, you would have had completely different experiences every single day. And so, one day was Blackfeet, one day was Crow, one day was Nez Perce, one day was Cheyenne. And so, we had that going for 5 days. And the lead artists there were Dean Nicolai and Tim Ryan, who are both amazing guys from Salish Kootenai College and so educated in archaeology and history. And I felt like the major themes that we really wanted to hit were Indigenous histories, because, there is literally real evidence that we've been here for at least 11,000 years.
At least.
At least.
Exactly.
And so, if you're looking to the scientific proof, and according to our stories, we've always been here.
Right.
And so, and then, it was like the presence piece and then the bison piece. And one piece that I never got to address that I think we want to try to focus on for 2023 was water. And interestingly, water played the biggest role in our planning. And Yellowstone revealed this past summer. Yes, we had the once in 100-year flood.
A little bit of a cosmic kind of boom. That's just what you need to focus on next year, maybe.
Well, and we had to look at it as not a bad thing, actually.
Right.
And I really, things like this where I feel like, maybe I take signs, if I'm on the right track or not. I feel like the Creator will give me these signs and I will just take them and try to do good, and move forward. And so when we had planned on doing the teepee village in Gardner.
Oh, my goodness.
Right at the Roosevelt Arch. And so when the flood happened, that made that not possible.
Right.
But we did still want to have a presence there because we didn't want to simply abandon the community of Gardner, who's been amazing, and Bill Berg is spectacular. And so we had been doing a year of planning there, and it all, became not possible. And so we still wanted to have a presence there. And so we worked with the Pretty Shield Foundation once again to bring the illuminated teepees to Gardner.
Oh, fantastic.
But it did force us to move the teepee village to Madison Junction, where a lot of people say, and I feel now that is where it was meant to be.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It pushed us deeper into the park.
Into the heart of the park.
Which I think is very important, to be in the park. Like you said, seeing that presence, whether it's right in the gate, but then in the park. I think people will not forget that imagery. And that's the one thing that always struck me about Yellowstone, was that you could drive all the way through that park, and even if you stopped at all sorts of things, you could easily come away with not feeling any Indigenous presence over the past 15 years and stuff that I have visited it. It's got to be so impactful to have that visual symbol, but then to have that interaction available, I think, with the cultural ambassadors and the tours. I hope it's something that you'll all be able to continue.
Well, it's actually something that I hope Yellowstone Park continues, because I work for systematic change or systemic change. Because, like I said, in the beginning, we didn't have space to do what we wanted to do. We've now made that space. Yeah. It is there now. It exists within the structure. And so now, who does it?
Right.
If Yellowstone National Park steps in to do that for me, I will walk away from Yellowstone Revealed feeling like I've made real tangible change, which is, as you'll see as we talk about the rest of what we do, a theme of mine.
It makes sense. I mean, they have archaeology programs, history programs, all of these things. They should make a place for this to be part of their core curricula, systematics, whatever they do in the park. It makes the park a more enjoyable and I don't know if truthful is the right word, but just real experience of what the park has been, that space, that cultural space has been, I should say, before it was even a park.
It even enriches the history of it, I feel, because
far more interesting.
Exactly, because there are so many awesome stories that are not mine to share at this moment, but from, that place that are spectacular that I feel like, the world could really benefit from knowing.
I mean, when they do fire campsite stories, could you imagine having a culture ambassador from a tribe telling some story under the stars?
Yeah.
But also I feel like with regard to bison and just the fact that these herds that have been there forever and people have been hunting them forever for 10,000 years and more, and the fact that that was one place where they were protected and brought back, there's so many ways in which that all makes so much sense. So congratulations, Francesca. That's huge.
It was an amazing thing, and I got to experience it for a day. My husband and I came for the rematriate, and water was a theme throughout this.
It sure was, whether it was coming up from below or from the sky.
Right, from the sky, because we came for the rematriate performance, which was going to be an evening event. And the rain fell that night, and I've never seen so much rain fall. It was unbelievable. And so it was postponed, but then we got to see it the next day. So we stayed overnight in West Yellowstone, and we came back the next day. And I have to say, when coming into the park through the West Yellowstone Gateway, at the sign that says "Welcome to Yellowstone," you guys had put a teepee right there. And of course, everyone from all over the world stops and takes their picture right there. So everyone who stopped there and took their picture there this summer has a teepee in their photo. And I think that was hugely impactful. And
that gives me goosies for sure. Yeah,
and
such a change. Yeah,
we go into Yellowstone all the time, but this time and we never stop at the sign and take a picture. But I'm like, Larry, we are going to stop and take a picture in front of the sign with the teepee, and so we did, and we got in line because there's a line. You get in because there's people. There's so many people wanting to take a picture there, and we were in line with these people from Slovakia, and so they were noticing the teepee. So we talked about the teepee with these people from Slovakia while we waited, and then we took their picture, and then they took our picture, and then we all went up into the park. But it was so important to have that there. So just that one piece.
Just that one. I mean, so it's right there. So anytime someone has that iconic photograph, that representation is part of it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that makes me so happy. It feels like, my tactics have been working, because I was like, I want to make it so that it's impossible to take a picture without our presence there. Like, you would actually have to Photoshop out the teepee. And so I really, really wanted our presence to be there no matter what.
Yeah. And then when we drove in, and we could just barely see the teepees coming into view. And then there's a great pull out right there. And you can get out of your car and look over this beautiful valley and see this group of, it looks like a teepee village in the background. And so we did that. And then we spent the day at the teepee village, which was amazing, to talk to all the different cultural ambassadors. And there were so many people there when we were there. And people from, again, all over the world coming. And there was a woman who was from Germany who we ran into frequently as we were kind of going from teepee to teepee. And she was from Germany, studying the park's interaction with indigenous people in the United States. So that's the reach, this interest has. And she had come over to be there that week to talk to everybody. So it was really interesting to see where people were from and the questions they were asking, and just kind of see that in play. It was just amazing. And then we did get to see the repatriate, because you guys did it again the next day.
Rematriate.
I'm sorry. Oh my gosh.
Whoa,
wow. Yeah. Thank you for the correction.
We're not going to edit that out. That is important.
That is hugely important.
Okay, we're going to talk about rematriation, but let me take a quick station break first.
Okay.
You are listening to The Dirt on the Past with co-hosts Crystal Alegria and Nancy Mahoney on KGVM Bozeman or wherever you find your podcasts. We are speaking today with Francesca Pine Rodriguez, the Executive Director of Mountain Time Arts.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, even me who's so it's important, matriation is so important in the matriarchy. For me to make that slip is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for catching that.
Explain the word to our listeners. Explain what we're talking about.
Explain rematriate. We can talk about that now if you want to.
Sure. So I think it is good to talk about it because I did want to talk a bit about the performance too in Yellowstone, which kind of connects to Bozeman. Rematriate, when Patty Valdez proposed that as the title of her project, it was like mind-blowing just to hear that word. And I was like, rematriate, because I completely understand and live within the patriarchy, which is, men being held up higher than women, and being in the lead. And for Indigenous folks, our societies were often matriarchal. And so I'm familiar also with the term matriarch and matriarchal, but I had never heard of rematriate. And so I thought that was really interesting. And she said, well, the buffalo, and also I would like to just say a little note, is I do call the bison buffalo, and our people do. Yeah. So she said the buffalo are us, and they are matriarchal, and so are we. And so whatever happens to the buffalo happens to us. And that right there kind of blew my mind, because me knowing like the experience that my people have had, about kind of like the attempted extermination of the buffalo that happened to us. And then when that didn't happen, the putting them in a place of boundary, a contained place that also happened to us, called reservations. And I feel like nowadays, the buffalo are starting to be restored and returned back to the people. At least there's some pathway towards that. And so now, and it also now feels like the right time where mainstream America is ready for more sources of information. As before, I felt like they were more closed to their sources of information, and really felt like what they read in their textbooks was true, what they heard on the news was true. And so us being in a time of where I feel like those trusted sources are now being rightfully so realized that they are not 100% true. I had to grow up with that. I grew up reading textbooks that I knew were wrong. But nobody would believe me, but now I feel like there is credibility to our actual truth, which is the truth, a part of the real story of America and Yellowstone National Park. And so rematriation is the return to the matriarchal society. That's what rematriate means to me.
It's
Thank
powerful.
You for that.
It's a powerful
Thank
word.
You for that.
It's a powerful idea too.
Yeah, and so it's as new to me, rematriate, as it is to you, but I love it.
And Patty Valdez on her trailer, that we'll talk about in a little bit when we talk more about what this piece of art is and was. On her trailer, she has written rematriate in huge letters. And so to see that is really a statement as well. To see that going down the road, or to see it parked somewhere. And then on the other side of her trailer, she has painted land back. So do those ideas kind of come together?
For me, yes, because I think about land back, I guess, and I never really, I guess, the way I think about things is not people-based. It's land-based. And I feel like that's what's different. And so when you say land back, I'm thinking, what would the world look like if we gave the land back to the buffalo?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would that look like? What would that have to look like? And really all of our keystone species, and which is kind of continued to be a theme through other things that we are doing, even with Bozeman Creek, because when we talk about revitalized relatives, we're talking about what if we gave the land back to our relatives, the flora and fauna of the valley. That's what land back means to me, and how it crosses into rematriation.
I know some organizations that are not even indigenous based. I think American Prairie is one of them, that they are interested in getting the land back to where the species that are on it have that health, to have those grasslands. My husband and I went bird watching and camping and went along a bit of that, and we're thinking very much about prairie and how beautiful and amazing, and how would it be to be able to see more of that and vast stretches of that, and how it would be for ecosystems and all of the living things that are in them. And there's a lot of resistance, so that's another whole podcast we'll have you back for.
Well, you mentioned birds, and that's going to set me off a little bit. I have to, I am a little bit of a amateur field ornithologist.
Fantastic. Do tell.
Which literally means I like to bird watch. So, I have a very elementary understanding, but I read this article, and I feel like this really speaks to like the concepts that I'm trying to get across to people. I read an article that had this very kind of cool headline that said, "Are birds psychic?" Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Ooh, what's this about?"
Yeah, right.
And so I, and the, kind of like that sexy headline,
like, tension grabbing, absolutely.
As a field ornithologist, that's the kind of thing that gets to me. Right, and so I'm like, interesting, okay. And so I'm reading the article, and the article is about how certain species of bird can predict the weather, and science has proven that they are doing that. They are predicting the weather and calculating their migration patterns based on future weather patterns, and that so they can tell when something major is coming. Fantastic. Like a hurricane,
my goodness. Yeah.
Stuff like that, almost up to a year in advance.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! Wow.
What science can't tell us is how.
Exactly.
Is the how.
But they've been noticing patterns that are saying there is this evidence that that's fascinating.
That they know, and
Well, I have to tell you our weird little experience the reason we were kind of up in that area around Shoto was because there's less than 100 whooping crane on the planet right now, right? And when they were really down to tiny numbers and trying to get chicks raised, they would put the eggs sometimes in those of sandhill cranes.
Okay.
Right? So last spring, there had been reports of one whooping crane coming through Shoto and all the prairie around there, heading up by Freeze-Out Lake with these two sandhill cranes. And a couple people saw it. It was only there 2 days. Well, so this fall, just about a month ago, we heard that it was back. One whooping crane, which is much bigger than the two sandhills.
Oh, yeah.
So my story in my head is that these were its foster parents.
Yeah.
And it's just traveling back and forth. And there's no other whooping cranes around. There's all these other sandhills hanging out. And this guy's like, well, whatever. I'm doing my thing. But it was incredibly beautiful to see. And people were coming from all different parts of Montana that were seeing the reports of these on a bird app, eBird or something, and we were so thrilled to see it, and we got to see it fly, and it was just an astonishing, the wingspan, and so my husband is trying to get me hooked on bird watching, and that was a pretty good start.
I love it, and I have a bird feeder and everything now, and so, but back to the story. So I had read this article that said, our bird psychic showed how they did it. They're predicting the weather potentially a year ahead, and so that and that was the basically the article was like, but we how do they do
how?
it? Yeah,
right.
And so I'm like, you know what? I think I have the answer to that, actually, because it made me think about these stories that my grandmother used to tell me. And she used to say how we used to talk to the animals. And we used to, the phrase she used was, we used to, quote unquote, speak the same language. And in my, child brain at the time, I'm like, oh, if you're talking to a squirrel, it's speaking English to you, or it's talking crow,
Right.
And then I start thinking, well, what language do they speak, and then I'm like, okay, like this is getting too complicated. And so, but the point was, is that here's the best way I can tell it. Have you ever, or do you now have any pets?
Yes.
Lots of people do.
Right.
That bond is real.
Oh, yeah.
And does your dog or cat or pet need to come up to you and speak in English to you to say, I'm hungry?
I know. No, of course not. No, we totally understand our dog. I know.
You're connected with that being. And you don't have to speak exactly the same language, but yet you do speak the same language because you understand one another exactly the way you need to, because you are that connected.
There's all that observation of their behavior, that interdependence, and you can totally see how that would make sense if you are living that way in your environment with the other living things in it.
Exactly. And so I think, that those birds are so connected to the environment, everything, wind patterns and everything, that they can tell when something is off.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and then thinking back to those old stories that my grandmother told me, it made sense now. Yeah. And I was like,
that does make sense.
To my adult brain now, I can make it make sense. And so I'm like, okay, like it's just the fact that we were that connected.
Yeah.
We were able to understand.
It is funny. I often feel like we go to these great lengths to try to scientifically prove all these things. And a lot of times it's like, but it's just these stories we've kind of always known back deep in cultural histories. And they're telling us the same thing.
And it's becoming its own field, traditional ecological knowledge.
Exactly.
And so, and that right now, like I said, is like gaining more credibility because now, as Western science is testing itself against our theories and such, that they're finding like, it's just interesting. It's just, for me, it's a different way to find your way to what's real. Yeah. Sometimes I say the truth, but it's my truth. Such a hard word, but it's what's real to us. And so, yeah. But I'm getting us off topic now. You got me started on my bird stuff.
I like the bird. So Francesca, just to go back to Yellowstone Revealed a little bit, where were some of your aha moments when you were in the midst of it? This was a week-long thing. It went from Saturday to Saturday or something like that, right? And so as you were going through it, what were some things that really stood out to you?
Something that really got me was like the fact that we didn't include water as a theme, and water became one of our biggest factors. And so for me, like I said, I'm taking the signs from the creator that, okay, then we should probably say something about water in 2023.
Yeah.
But, one of the aha moments that I had was the fact that I'm trying to bring Indigenous presence to Yellowstone National Park, and then with the people who were there, whether they were a cultural ambassador or just someone who wanted to come check it out and visit, they said that they felt more welcome. They felt like it was more like home. Mm-hmm. And they hadn't felt that connection before. Mm-hmm. And so I just really hope that people found more connection to the land. And also one of my aha moments is that it's like, it's kind of just validating my, assumption that this was something that is, I feel like, a natural fit for the park, because I felt like when we were putting up the teepees and stuff, the parks folks were really careful, and this is rightfully so, that we didn't disturb the landscape. But when we put these 13 teepees up, everybody who looked at them said they looked like they belonged there and they were a part of that landscape, more so than that information center house that has stood there for I don't even know how many years. And so that was one of my aha moments where I felt like we are a part of this, and it's so natural that even though I feel like we altered the landscape, it looked like it wasn't altered at all.
Yeah. It just felt natural for that piece to be there.
Yeah, like when you saw the teepees off in the distance, did they look out of place?
No, not at all.
They did not.
It's
it
so
was like
interesting.
a welcome sight.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there it is. That natural thing that should be there is now there.
And that had been there. I mean, we've seen lectures on park architecture, like all the national park architecture and stuff, which has all been invented and for specific reasons that have to do with creating parks and creating nation states and things like that. So it is funny to think how, of course, it makes sense that you put some teepees up and that's how the landscape would have looked, and the fact that it was always changing and exactly where the encampments were might have moved slightly, from year to year, decade to decade, but you have those places where there's so much stratigraphy telling you that this was a place that was visited, time and time again.
So I do have another huge moment where I guess, I don't know if it was a moment or a realization, but I did know as we were planning this, and the planning, by the way, the planning for this took 18 months or so. Wow. And we were meeting with Indigenous scholars from across the state and Wyoming and different community folks and parks folks and, all kinds of stakeholders. And so, all I know is I wanted to somehow document what we were doing. But what I realized along the way was that the process of what we were doing was actually far more important than the events themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Because it put into position the park needed to have tribal engagement on a level it had never had tribal engagement before. And so, like we said, even though for us, the number of tribes at the teepee village was much lower than I wanted, it was more than the park has ever really had. Yeah. And so, it was there was 14 tribes being, represented there where we actually had people there. Yeah. And so, that piece right there, and then them gaining access to the networks of people and then learning how to do things in a different way. Mm-hmm. So if the park reaches out and wants to work with a tribe, they trigger this government to government, very bureaucratic process, mm-hmm. which is right in that that's how you deal with a sovereign nation, government to government. Is that really how you get things done, though? Can we, really trust our president to work with the president of Canada to do an art show? Probably not. You need to work with other folks. Yeah. And so that was the approach that I think really had never been taken before, was working with folks on that community level where I feel sustainability truly lies.
Right. And just to build those relationships too, that had never been in place before. So now you come out of this with these relationships built, with people to people instead of government to government.
Yeah, there's relationships built. There's been space carved out. Yeah. Now we just need to get a budget in there that supports it.
Right.
No park service.
Yeah.
But and they now own 20 teepees, and so there's
wow.
Great.
Yeah, and they have to care for them.
They need to.
Good.
Yes, that's exciting.
Well, I have to say, when I was there was a huge presence of park people, park staff there, and they were, interacting and enjoying. You could tell that that you guys had built relationships. Yeah. I could see you guys were friends.
Yeah.
There was friendships there that you could just automatically see, and so that is paradigm shifting.
Yeah.
All of that, which you just talked about, is paradigm shifting.
And how do I share that with people? Therein lies my challenge, because I'm all about tangible change. And so, if I, whatever happens with Yellowstone revealed for us, we don't know the ending of that story yet or the beginning of the new one, that this inspired me to do a documentary.
Oh, nice.
So that documentation that we were taking, along the way is now footage for our documentary, which for me is going to serve as a template for other Indigenous communities who perhaps want to see themselves reflected in their national parks and their spaces. How did they do it? They don't have to make an appointment with me to talk about it. They can just watch this free documentary. And also that documentary will also showcase what we did in Yellowstone. And so that'll be premiering in Bozeman in the spring or summer of 2023.
That's so
exciting.
Wow.
Wonderful. Exciting. That's amazing, Francesca. What a great way to show, because it is a visual.
And to have that ongoing impact and example for others. That's huge.
That's huge. Okay. So I want to move on a little bit and talk about Mountain Time Arts and the other projects that you've been working on. And a really significant one happened in October of 2021. And that was when Mountain Time Arts brought 7 teepees to a bluff that we here locally call Pete's Hill. That's a bluff that overlooks Bozeman and beyond into the Gallatin Valley. And so this was an event that you did around Indigenous Peoples Day in October of 2021. And these teepees were illuminated, and they're the same teepees brought by the Pretty Shield Foundation and the Rocky Mountain Tribal leaders to Yellowstone this year, but you had worked with them last year to do this. So maybe you could just talk about that. And that was in 2021. And then we had another, Mountain Time Arts led another event for Indigenous Peoples Day just a few weeks ago in 2022. So maybe you could talk about both of these Indigenous People Day events and how Mountain Time Arts kind of brought these to the community of Bozeman.
Sure. So we were really fortunate that, the collaboration between Pretty Shield Foundation, Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders, and Mountain Time Arts happened last year. It seemed to happen just organically, unexpectedly. And so bringing them to Bozeman was a way to do a community activity, because I feel like we were still kind of coming out of our pandemic shells and wanted to have an event where people could safely come out and enjoy something. And so the big illuminated 7 teepees on Pete's Hill were just a hit with the community and did exactly what we wanted them to, which was having an event that the community could come to at their convenience and enjoy, free and open to the public. And then also that presence again, establishing an Indigenous presence here. And then number 3 was, for me, as a part of Indigenous Peoples Day Montana, readying the community for a call to action, because we are trying to get Indigenous Peoples Day passed at the state level. That's me with my MTA hat off and my Indigenous Peoples Day hat on. But, as you can see, everything is connected. But and so that worked really well last year and was beautiful. And then this year we took an opposite approach. Instead of altering the landscape, we disturbed the landscape as little as possible, because although the teepees were amazing and everything, it really did a number on the native plants in the area. And I know that's something and not a glamorous thing to think about, but something that I think about. And so this year I was wanting to do something, I guess it may be kind of the idea of strip farming, where it's like one year you really do crap to the land and then you let it recover and then you do another plot, and then and so you
let it regenerate.
You get what you need while trying to let it heal. And so I didn't want to be responsible for damaging the native plant life there. And so I at least a second year in a row.
Yeah,
And so we went the opposite direction this year and invited Patty Valdez back because we did get rained out for her originally scheduled performances at Old Faithful and at the Teepee Village, which those performances did happen, but they didn't happen at the times they were advertised to happen, which, was weather dependent. And so we wanted to bring Rematriate to Bozeman, and we did just that. And it was another amazing performance by Patty Valdez, and it's a dancing buffalo performance where they're moving buffalo sculptures that are made of willow and what we call cookum scarves, but they're grandmother scarves that actually have an interesting connection to the Ukrainian people. Another show. Okay.
That's a whole
other topic. But it's a part of our history. And so it was like these really beautiful moving buffalo sculptures that were made of organic material, and each moving buffalo consisted of a mother and a daughter, or a grandmother and a granddaughter, or a aunt and a niece. And so to really talk about rematriate into the future, and then to have the community witness that. And it was just really fun. I was one of the buffalo, me and my daughters,
you and your daughter.
Me and my 20-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And, and it was just really fun because, like we were like stomping our feet and we were trying to sound like buffalo because we were actually in a stock trailer and we have to sound like buffalo wanting to get out. And then, the door opens and we dance out, and then we dance up to the site, and it culminates in this, probably 300 people round dance up on Pete's Hill. It was just gorgeous.
Yeah, with music, with a drum group there as well.
With our live drum group and our traditional music and our impactful speakers, including Crystal. Because we talked about, it was really about unity and community was our theme this year. And so, when we talk about systemic change, I really want the city of Bozeman, because this year was historically significant because Indigenous Peoples Day was passed as an ordinance and a new holiday. Yeah. It used to not be an actual holiday, like the Columbus Day. We call that the C word. The C word, when it used to be the C word, there wasn't technically a holiday on that day for the city, but now there is. Yeah. It's an actual holiday that city employees will have. And so
they had the day off.
They have the day off.
Yeah. Which is a huge financial commitment by the city of Bozeman to Indigenous Peoples
to recognize
Day.
That. No, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a huge achievement.
That's within the structure, right? That's systemic change.
That's systemic change.
But now it's like, now the city, I feel like, should be also responsible for helping the celebration each year. And so I'm hoping that, next year I'm going to work with them to plan it. But Mountain Time Arts will not be the financial partner that we have been. Right. And so that'll be an upcoming thing of how the city wants to handle that.
Yeah.
Because
Francesca, I worry about if you leave it to the city. I just don't trust them to do anything nearly as cool as you've done the last 2 years. But you gotta stay in there as an advisor or something.
I'm not going. Okay. That's my contribution.
Okay.
Contribution.
Okay. I don't want you going anywhere and letting them have free reign. That ain't gonna come out nice. That's gonna be bad.
But it's so interesting to see their commitment to it, and they are committed. They are all in on this thing, which is so amazing to see. And it's a model because during her speech, or I can't remember if it was you that said it or Marcia Small that said it, but this is one of the only places in the United States where the only cities in the United States that gives people the day off for Indigenous Peoples Day. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
I think you are saying that right, and it wasn't me. It was Marcia Small who said that, and she had been doing some research to try to find out if we could find any more cities that had anything like this, and we couldn't. So if anybody out there who's listening knows of any other cities that actually have a real official holiday for Indigenous Peoples Day, we would like to know, because we haven't found any. It's just, and so Bozeman is really setting, a precedent, I feel like, not only potentially for the state, but for the nation.
Yeah. I wish the state would look to Bozeman a little bit more and pass Indigenous Peoples Day.
That would be exciting.
A group has gone,
every year.
Every year.
It's
been Senate bill has been proposed, or House bill, different strategies each year, and I don't know how many years now it's been proposed, but it's more than 4 or 5. So. Hopefully
it's not going to stop us from keep on trying, because now we're going to have the power of our community, and the constituents, and and so we find out what's effective, and we try that. And it's all about, with the city, kind of like the fear that they might mess it up. I feel like the goal should never to try to be perfect. The goal should try to be cool, fun, make it cool, fun, and just like an interesting experience. And I think that's all we can ask for. So it's going to be okay.
I think it would be one of our coolest holidays, actually. It'd be such a cool thing to think about what ways to celebrate. I was just thinking about what we would eat on Indigenous, if this becomes a really regular thing. I mean, look at how long it took in Montana for women to get the vote, right? They just kept at it and at it and at it. So it may be a long haul, but it will happen. It will happen.
And we have such interesting stories from other cultures. Like I had said in some of our planning meetings, I had attended a Sons of Norway event that I didn't even know that group was in town. But
wait, here in Bozeman?
Here in Bozeman.
Okay, that's new to me.
And
Sons of Norway.
And so and it was Cheyenne Stevenson who had connected with her roots that really is what brought us there, and so it was just really cool to see a Caucasian person connect with their roots, kind of almost right in front of me, because I had known her for a while, and she identified with, I feel like, the Native culture and philosophies a lot, but I think she always wondered about her own roots. And I feel like Indigenous Peoples Day is that, because if you go back far enough, even if you don't know your people or you don't feel identified with them, if you go back far enough, you can see what their relationship with the land was. Because we all somehow depend on the land to survive. And that's what I'm always trying to get people to, is our connection to the land, whether it's through Indigenous Peoples Day, Yellowstone Revealed, or Bozeman Creek.
Oh, Francesca, you have such a way of tying it up in such a lovely way that makes sense to people that they can relate to. So that's a real gift. I want to ask you, what else is on the horizon for Mountain Time Arts? I have been told that there's an event coming up with our friend Ben Pease, who's also interacted a lot with Extreme History. So can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah, so
next up is going to be an event called Revitalize Relatives, a public artwork installation by Ben Pease, who's an Apsalaga Crow artist, and Jim Madden, who is an architect and founder of Mountain Time Arts here in town. And they're together have created this glass installation that will go over the bridge of City Hall, along the railing. And so when you view into the creek, you'll be viewing through a glass panel, and that glass panel will have the relatives that we would like to see revitalized in Bozeman Creek, which were designed by the amazing Ben Pease.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
That sounds amazing.
That does.
Yeah.
That does.
And so that will be, it's a piece of artwork that the city, it's our first permanent type of art installation. I feel a little bit weird about permanent art installations, just because I am so about not altering the landscapes, but we want to make statements and things. But so this is our first permanent one, and it being in front of the city hall, I think is really significant, and will bring attention to water and the Bozeman Creek here in town. And that will be on April 22nd, Earth Day.
I can see all the Hawthorne Elementary School students walking over and learning about that and the creek and Bozeman and all of these other things. I mean, that's such an opportunity for educators to use that public art in a way to really expand what kids can experience and think about in their own hometown. And
they can do that on their own without having to set up anything with Mountain Time Arts. And see, these are the things where I'm trying to make accessible and regular to Bozeman. And so, and then we're going to have something else in Yellowstone this summer, which has been yet to be determined. I'm thinking we do want to do something with water, climate, but I don't know what that'll be yet. We're still cooking that up with Yellowstone Park.
That's great. Well, I'm so glad to hear that there will be something, because there was such people so loved Yellowstone Revealed, and I think just to keep that momentum going, and hopefully, like you said, the park will take this on themselves, just like the city of Bozeman will take on Indigenous Peoples Day in a way that they fund it and keep it going.
And that would be my goal, is to start these really awesome things, and because it really shows for me real change that people are taking seriously. Because when people ask me, about diversity and inclusion, I'm also a board member for Montana Racial Equity, and have a lot of interest in that field. And so, they're like, how do you know if we're actually serious about doing it, or our place is serious about doing it? Is it in your budget?
There it is.
That's the bottom line question.
Absolutely. It really is. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then I think that means you need to do some thinking. And then also for me, I'm like, you should always have a hospitality in your budget too, because these are hard things that are hard to get people to donate money for, or grants to pay for. But and this is what I talk about in terms of the system doesn't often work for me when I'm trying to do something. Because it doesn't exactly go the way the IRS likes things, And so when I'm dealing with an elder, for example, you want to gift them properly, which would be if they came to speak or something, you would just give them a $20 bill, a pack of cigarettes, a braid of sweetgrass, and maybe a piece of cloth or something. And, the 4 things. How do I write that into a grant? That's, really hard.
I think you're going to be able to figure out how to change that system. So that's a line item, budget line for elders that is in our tax code, okay? So I know you can do it, Francesca.
I'm sure that you had a lot of experience doing that at Montana State University, because you worked at Montana State, and we worked together. Well, we worked in different departments, but we were both at Montana State University at the same time. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with MSU accounting about buying tobacco at the store downtown. They're like, we can't do this. I'm like, okay, let me explain.
And then I'm always asking questions to Krista. I'm like, do I get cigarettes? Do I get loose tobacco? Is there a certain, a little bit of the work I had done with people and wanting to make appropriate gifts, So it's been such a learning experience.
Educational. We had to educate.
We found that the other graduate students wanted to know more about it because they wanted to talk to people and start to bring in this wider, different types of traditional knowledge and ask people, but know to do it the right way. And they were finding, their professors had no idea what to tell them because, of course, when they went to school, nobody was doing that. So it's been, I feel like I'm seeing the change, which is really wonderful.
Me too.
All that impact it's happening.
And it's been a really fun experience to be in a position to push that change. And where some things are, I kind of look for things that are just right on that edge. If they just take that little push, they'll go right into the next phase. And so that's where I've been focusing my energies and my battles. But, with Mountain Time Arts, I do want to say that we're not all about indigenous projects or anything like that. I do want to bring indigenous presence. It's just that there's been such a lack of it. It feels like a flood of it now. But if you step back and take a look at the bigger picture, it's actually very little and not enough. And so, and Mountain Time Arts, I'm really interested in that connection to our farmers and ranchers, rural Montana, because we all have a connection to the land. That might look a little different, but I think, the land and the environment are something that we all have to live within. And, how can we all get on the same page when our politics are so bitterly divided? And I think it's by just getting real about what's real to us.
What's important.
We all need water.
Right.
We all need good food. And so I think
we all need respect. I mean, you need some dignity
and community
in your life too, and so you have to give it in order to receive it. Francesca, it's been absolutely amazing talking with you today, and there's so much more we want to discuss. I see at least 2 or 3 podcasts in our future, but for today we've run out of time. So again, I want to thank you and just tell people where they can find Mountain Time Arts. In terms of a website or social media, in case they want to follow along with your programming and events.
mountaintimearts.org. mountaintimearts.org is our website. Great. And we are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out. We have a lot of cool photos and a lot of good content on there. And watch for our upcoming documentary, which we're actually going to be submitting to film festivals and all kinds of things.
Okay, I think you need an Indigenous People Day recipe book to come out. I'm going to put that on your list.
Ooh, that sounds really good.
Sound good.
We work with like Can Miller on that or something.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, she's awesome.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so great. Well, I just want to say, Francesca, how important the work you're doing in the community really is, in the community of Bozeman, but also the wider community, the community of Montana, but also the nation. And now those people from Slovakia have seen a crow teepee or whatever indigenous nation, they've
seen. It was a crow teepee.
Was it? I thought it was. So they have seen that teepee. So you're making inroads internationally. So with Yellowstone Revealed, but also with everything else you're doing. So congratulations to you and your small team.
Thank you. Yeah. And we are all totally donation based. So if you like what you see, as you can see, I like to do really awesome things. And, the more money we can raise, the cooler things we can do.
Yeah.
Money goes to a great cause.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have a big donate button under our podcast for you.
Right.
So thank you, Francesca. And thanks to all of our listeners out there for joining us today. If you love this podcast, please tell a friend and make sure to subscribe so that it shows up in your podcast feed each week. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, but only if you liked it. Thanks for listening today, and we hope you can join us again to find out more about the dirt on the past.
A big thank you also to our editor and sound guru, Steve Durbin, and thanks to Lawson Alegria for mixing the music, and to John Chadwell for help getting the podcast out in the world.